האם העידן של פוסט אמת, פייק ניוז ועובדות אלטרנטיביות שבו אנו נמצאים, שיבש את היכולת שלנו לברר את המציאות ולקבל החלטות גם בחדרי הביטחון הלאומי? האם האנשים בחדרים האלו מסוגלים עדיין להבחין בין אמת לבין שקר? בין תמונה וסרטון אמיתיים לבין תוצרים של טכנולוגיית הדיפ פייק?
President Trump is a total and complete dipshit.
בין ספינים ומאמצי השפעה לבין עובדות? ויותר מכך, האם מקבלי ההחלטות ממשיכים לראות בניתוח המקצועי מבוסס העובדות את הבסיס לקבלת ההחלטות? קיים כיום קושי אמיתי, הולך וגובר, לברר את המציאות, להבין אותה ולקבל על בסיסה ההחלטות, גם בחדרי הביטחון הלאומי. אמנם לגופי הביטחון הלאומי תמיד היו בעיות להבין את המציאות, אבל עכשיו הם מתמודדים בנוסף לבעיות הישנות, גם עם בעיות חדשות. אלה לא נובעות מגורם אחד, אלא מצירוף בעייתי של גורמים המאפיינים את התקופה הנוכחית. העצמת מאבקים פוליטיים ואידיאולוגיים, טכנולוגיה משבשת, אובדן האמון במוסדות מספרי האמת ומתקפות עליהם, התפתחויות רעיוניות שהובילו לערעור מקומה של האמת, עלייתם של מנהיגים פופוליסטיים ושימוש גובר במאמצי דיסאינפורמציה. כל אלה מוצאים את דרכם לחדרי דיונים ביטחוניים, משפיעים על תהליכי קבלת ההחלטות ומשבשים אותם. אז איך מקבלים החלטות בענייני ביטחון לאומי בעולם של פוסט אמת, פייק ניוז ועובדות אלטרנטיביות?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Inbal Orpaz. I'm a researcher in the Lipkin-Shaka program in the INSS. In this session, we're going to address the question of fake news in an era of post-truth and the other questions that you saw in this video. But before we delve into this session, perhaps if we could turn on the light on the audience as well so that we can play a game and see to what extent can you distinguish between truth and lies. Now we're going to show you a series of images, and I would like to ask you with a show of hand to raise your hand when you see the image. If does it look real or is it fake and made by a machine, generated by a machine? Let's start with the first one. Fake or real? This woman, is she real or fake? If you think that if it's a real woman, please raise your hand. I think that half the audience voted that it's true and that it's real. She is real. Let's move on to the next image. Is she real or fake? A show of hands. Who thinks that this girl is a real picture? So most of you think that it's fake. And indeed, it is fake. This gentleman, real or fake? A show of hands if you think he's real. About half to a majority think he's real, but he's fake. And last, this guy, is he real or fake? The bottom half thinks he's real, the upper not so much, or maybe I can't see you, and he is indeed real. So I think that this short game we just played illustrates the depth of this problem. We are living in a reality in which it's becoming more and more difficult to distinguish what's fake, what's real. And this game we played, we prepared a full version of it. You're welcome to play with it. We'll teach you how at the end of this session, and we'll send you the link to the app, or there's a booth outside with the address. So this session is going to be made up of 4 brief talks on the topics that we are discussing in the Lipkin-Shaka program in the INSS. The first to present is Brigadier General in Reserves Itai Brun. He will talk about fake news in national security rooms, and he will try to ask how come this question has become essential for decision makers and the security echelon. He will be followed by Dr. Liraz Margalit, who will explain how come our brains are designed to believe fake news. She will talk about our aspects as human beings, how our minds are wired to do that, and then I'll go back to the stage to talk about technologies against fake news, and then Dr. Tehilla Shwartz-Altshuler will try and ask, is fake news the problem or the symptom? And in summary, we'll hold a brief conversation between us, and then we will arrive at the moment you're all waiting for, lunch. So I'd like to invite Brigadier General in Reserves, Itai Brun. Inbal gave us a peek into this confused world in which it's very difficult to distinguish between truth and lies. And I'll try to explain that the problem is even broader than that. And then we'll hear that the problem is perhaps even broader than the breadth that I'm suggesting. And we're going to connect that problem with what has been called here the national security rooms. These pictures, these images have become iconic. These rooms, the situation, Obama's situation room, Trump's room with the cables on the table, and Netanyahu's security consultations with a series of ministers of defense and chiefs of general staffs that keep changing around him. And what I claim is that this problem also characterizes the national security rooms, these rooms in which politicians meet with the professionals, people that are planners, people from the intel division. And this issue, all in all, is a relatively interesting one because according to this claim, these rooms are not immune. The problems do not stop at the entrance to these rooms, despite the immense investments in resources that are supposed to bring information as a basis for decision making, despite the very risky operations that are supposed to provide access. That are supposed to provide access that will bring this information. Despite all that, these rooms also face this difficulty of distinguishing between truth and lies, fake and real. So these rooms also have a problem to distinguish between truth and lies. I'm talking about a certain disruption, and it's not new, I'll soon explain, but it's an existing disruption which characterizes these rooms. In recent days, we've all been talking about the deal of the century. Can we analyze professionally this deal of the century? Yesterday, at the opening evening of this conference, we saw this debate, which was a more American one. Was it justified to kill Soleimani? And this gives us the impression that traditional mechanisms that were based on common sense, facts, and information are now succumbing in the face of such an overload of information, perceptions, and knowledge. And perhaps the most prominent phenomena in these rooms is a multiplicity of truth, compiling various stories and narratives based on reality that coexist without any ability to decide between them and without a burning desire to decide. They live one next to each other. They coexist. That's wonderful. Isn't that what liberal democracies want? For all these narratives to be in the room, to clash with each other. And this argument will help us find out reality to discover the truth. But the thing is that this doesn't really work anymore. It doesn't work in the social media networks, and it also doesn't work in these rooms. Moreover, these mechanisms that at their center are questions of doubt and argument, which are the basis for a discussion to clarify reality, these mechanisms are the platform through which the lies and distortions and spins all enter the room. Now, these problems of national security rooms, these are not new problems. They had always characterized these rooms from the perception biases of Pearl Harbor and Barbarossa, and sticking to Yom Kippur concepts and the feather of imagination of the 9/11. These problems are still present there, and they've never been resolved. These old problems, by nature, they were the tip of the iceberg kind of problems. We had very little information, and we tried to understand the full picture with that little information, and our biases, perceptual biases, entered that field. At some point, these problems encountered two major revolutions: the information revolution, this tremendous overload of data that come at tremendous paces in different formats. And this encounter really emphasized that the gap between knowing and understanding. Yes, we know a lot, but the question is, do we understand a lot? And the second issue is the encounter with the change in the enemy, the disappearance of the enemy, all that heightened the old problems. And alongside the old problems and the old problems that were heightened, now there are also new problems that are a new type of problem. These problems are also related to the fact that today there is no refuted theory, that one cannot find some kind of a basis for it in information. This is one of the biggest influences of the information revolution. So when every refuted theory can be based in information, then the ability to clarify what reality is in these rooms has become disrupted. Now, these rooms have become a sort of aquarium, and I would like to thank Tehilla for this metaphor, and she will be soon presenting here. From these rooms, you can see very well what's happening outside through the media, so through the social media networks, and what's happening outside truly impacts these rooms. On the other hand, from the outside, you can see these rooms. Benny Gantz will speak here this evening, and in Protective Edge, when he showed a presentation, that presentation was leaked a short while afterwards, and the outside can see the inside, and this creates a certain noise, and this noise inside the rooms makes it difficult to decide. So what are the new difficulties? The difficulties we've already seen: to distinguish between truth and lies, and we're entering an era in which it will be very difficult to see whether the video, the image, the audio, are they real, are they fake? You saw that. So challenging the position of truth, of clarifying reality within decision making, you have to be naive to think that what's happening outside is not happening inside these rooms, and the organized, institutionalized attack on the truth tellers, whether it's the judiciary, the law enforcement systems, the academia, the media in certain aspects, and it's happening in the US for sure, but also in Israel it has reached the professional echelon. It would be very tempting to blame it all on Trump, to say that it's all because of Trump and that he causes all these things. Well, he represents an era. In my view, he's also to a great extent shaping this era, but he's also exposing some genuine problems in the decision-making processes. The biggest victim of this entire thing is fact-based professional analysis, and it falls victim as it encounters beliefs and feelings that have taken over public discourse and have entered national security rooms as well. Hi. My name is Liraz Margalit. I'm a behavioral researcher in the digital world. I hope you still have some power left, and until my presentation comes up, with your permission, I'd like to check this. Even though it's already noontime, please say good morning so that I can hear you. Boker Tov, good morning. Okay, so now we can start. I'd like to start with a brief story. I have a podcast at the Tel Aviv radio station, and one of my interviewees, and she's sitting here in the audience, in that podcast, she wrote, "Listen, your podcast has disappeared from the internet. I want to show it to someone, and there's an error message when you enter the page, not just our session." So I went in, and this is what it said. Somebody has already kicked this page's ass. and I was thinking all conspiracy, and I was thinking about looking at the other 102, the Tel Aviv radio station podcasts, and only mine disappeared. And I became so excited. Wow, out of everybody else, somebody has taken an interest in me, has decided to take down my podcast. So I called the radio's content manager, and I said to him, and he said, Liraz, I've been dealing with this for 24 hours now. We're working on the website, and now we're fixing your podcast. And I had to explain to him that I don't care about the reason, because I already thought about what I'd post on Facebook and conspiracy, and how everybody will look at my post when I say that they've taken it down. And I said, Ro'i, you owe me a conspiracy. And he said, don't stop there. Facts are for the weak, not for you. So my time in the social media led me to learn this. I didn't even think about it, how much people love conspiracies, and now I'd like you to understand why in the little time I have. What do you see here? A Star of David, right? It didn't take you too long to figure that out. Now, as people blow it up, you can see Star of David and two triangles, the Kaniza triangle that was created in 1950. And if you look at this image carefully, there are no Stars of David, no triangles, but this is our awareness that completes the different parts. Because what I'd like to tell you here is that the Gestalt, back in the 1930s to the 1950s, they discovered something amazing that nobody discovered before them. Until Gestalt, people thought that reality, whatever we see in reality enters our minds like cold waves, light waves, smell, and then our mind completes the picture based on reality, and that's called realism. But today we understand that it doesn't work like that. The main idea that I'd like you to understand about Gestalt is that what we see depends not only on the objective traits, but also the interpretation that we award. And how is this interpretation received? We have these mental models, and this means something very simple. It means there is a significant difference between subjective reality and what's actually happening. And this gap is unbridgeable, and it is highly influenced by our experience. So let's see. I'm going to give you two quotes. By show of hands, tell me which one you think is correct. One, August 2015, Donald Trump allowed a sick child to take his own private jet in order to receive urgent medical care. Number two, February 2016, his older cousin of Trump, who died recently, was quoted in his last words as a person who boasts this name proudly, don't let that slime bag become president. Who thinks, by show of hands, that number one is correct? Who thinks that quote number two is correct? Well, actually, the website that does fact checking shows us that number two is correct. But look how much our experience has a way to mislead us. Now, there was another trick here, small conceptual one. I don't know if you can see this, but the contrast of quote number two, it's much, stronger. That's the illusion of truth. When the contrast is stronger, it doesn't matter what's written there. We have a greater tendency to believe what's written. So, actually, what we understand is that this mental act of checking the facts, that requires many cognitive efforts. So just think about the overload of information, especially in the world of social media, the digital world that we need to deal with day in, day out. I'm not even trying to ask you to try and exercise rational thinking, because it simply won't work, because we won't be able to survive that way. This is why it's much easier for us to work with our emotion. Our emotion is the most important mechanism that was developed in us humans. And it turns out, this is from a recent study, what do you think is the greatest indicator for the reliability of information? The number of likes it receives and the number of retweets totally. And this has been proven. This is a finding that has been proven in 3 separate studies. The more a tweet has more likes and retweets, the greater the chances that it's true. This is how our mechanism works. And it's efficient for our logic, because the most efficient logic that has evolved for us is emotion. Emotions enable us to decide quickly without thinking too much about the essence of our decision. And what we see is that when we reach a decision, just look at this slide, there are three elements that impact it. Perception, we'll soon see that, emotion, and all the rest are automatic decisions that we don't even think of. And look how much of our decision is devoted to rational, logical examination of information. Hardly 15% of all the information we receive, and that's a lot, undergoes some meticulous examination. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive in this world. So we actually have to work with our emotion perceptually. How does it work? Look at these two recipes. These are recipes for chocolate cake that are identical. In the first one, we wrote in a writing that's legible. The other one, the writing isn't so legible. It's much harder. So people had asked, what are the chances that you'll bake this cake? How long will it take you to prepare it? How easy will it be to prepare it? Now look. The recipe that was in handwriting that was much more difficult to decipher, people thought that it would take longer, even though it's the same recipe. This is how our mind operates, and we talked about emotion. Just pay attention how much impact emotion has. Let's go back to 1950. General Mills, what it did, it decided to create a product for housewives. Back then, women were homemakers, and their entire schedule revolved around the home and the family. They decided to prepare a mixed cake. That was very innovative. A mix that you just need to add water and milk to, and that was it. They said this will improve the lives of women, and they spent millions on marketing. It was out in the shelves. Nobody bought it. They went to a psychologist called Ernest Dichter, and he spoke with the women, and he realized that it made them feel guilty, because if my whole day revolves around the home, then what have I done? I'm not worth anything. He said, take it back to the plant, the mix, and you should add 2 eggs to the preparation process. Now everybody bought it, because now I'm investing something in the process. I'm no longer lazy. Now it's like the IKEA effect. I worked on it, I did something, and not only did everybody buy this became one of the best sold and most profitable of their products. And look how much of an effect this has, and look what fake news are for us. And I'll stop here with Bernays, who is Freud's cousin, and look what Freud said, and he followed suit. The engineering of consent of the masses enables us to efficiently manipulate without the masses being aware of that. And just think about it, how every piece of information that we think about goes through all of our processes. Thank you very much. Okay, after Itai demonstrated the problem and its depth and why it's important to discuss this topic of fake news in national security rooms and within the security context, and after Liraz convinced you that it's so easy to fall into the trap of lies and that our mind is wired to listen to emotions and not facts, I'd like to talk about the solution. So the first thing that we addressed was the problem. We all agree that the problem is that we live in an era with a growing difficulty in distinguishing between truth or lies, and as a result, we have a difficulty in decision making. But one of the problems that kind of hovered here is what's new. We know that every image we see, definitely if it's in a magazine or an ad or commercial, we need to be suspicious that it had some Photoshop work, and as part of our history, for example, the famous picture of Herzl meeting the German Kaiser, that didn't really happen, and that was a photo montage. So the question is, what's new? And there are several answers to this question. One of the main answers is that it's the technology that's new. It had an impact on the problem on its two ends. On the one hand, we've all become manufacturers of content. We can all generate content. And there's also the distribution. If in the past there was a very small group of people, powerful people, and media outlets, and now everybody with a push of a button can publish a post that will reach millions worldwide. So technology, we can say that perhaps it did not create the problem, but it definitely accelerated it. And as we look at the solutions, we also need to think in that direction. So in the Lipkin-Shahak program, which is researching this problem, we examine 4 possible directions. And the first one has to do with digital literacy. What we mean by that is educating the public. It's about educating the public and developing tools. For example, that game we played here earlier. And if you play it a lot, you'll probably develop your skills, your capabilities to notice when a picture that is shown to you is fake. And that will make you more critical when a picture is presented to you. The next possible area of solution is methodologies, tools, for example, to check facts. The next category of solutions is regulation, and that's where countries can intervene and pass laws and to enforce laws, for example, with respect to technological platforms that enable the dissemination of lies. And the last category is technology. Because of we looked at the 2 last categories for 2 reasons. The technology is what accelerated this problem, so we thought that perhaps to a great extent it can solve the problem that it created. Another reason is that we are living in Israel, which is a startup nation. This is where technologies are dispersed to the whole world. Now, the issue of fake news has been in the headlines at least since 2016, the year of Trump's ascension to power and the Brexit. And we know that whenever there's a global trend, the technological startups in Israel respond and develop solutions. So we tried to see which solutions exist in Israel in order to solve this problem. And surprisingly enough, we reached less solutions than what we had expected to find. But before that, I'd like to talk about some of the directions in which we thought we would find solutions. So one area that we expected to see technological solutions has to do with text analysis, for technology to be automatically capable of going over text and analyzing them and see whether there are lies. There are also technologies that will be able to say to media outlets whether an image or a video that they're publishing are real or fake. Also has to do with fact-checking and identifying campaigns of bots, led by bots. We forgot a bit about bots, but it was a key problem in the recent elections. Since we couldn't really find the solutions we had expected to find, we sent out a request for proposals, and we asked for the companies to share with us some of their solutions. And ultimately, we reached about 3 groups of startups providing solutions that operate in these areas. The first one has to do with lie and liar detection, and one of the problem is the whistle that operates under globes, and they take statements made by politicians and check whether they are spreading lies or not. And other companies prevent ads in websites that disseminate fake news. Certain brands that don't want their ads to appear in websites that disseminate fake news. They wish to block their ads from these websites. Another group of startups deal with the world of identifying bot change. We have Sayabra, for example, that's just nearby in the Tel Aviv University and was also invested by their investment fund, and Communi that worked with the Central Elections Committee in the elections this year and with the Foreign Ministry. And these are organizations which map the bot networks when we are in campaign times. And the most interesting category is the deep fake. That's a combination of fake news and deep learning. These are technologies that enable the generation and mass dissemination of synthetic or fake content, whether it's video or audio, that are generated by machine. These are the kind of pictures that we saw at the game at the beginning. It's a growing trend. We can see the Google searches for this combination. And we have examples of videos that were generated by an Israeli startup in this field, and we can see global leaders that fake videos of them have been disseminated. Other companies, they take a company, let's say Sear Ally, they say we're going to check for other companies, for example, insurance companies, whether an image they receive, a picture they receive, is it real or fake. This has a significant economic value, and we will know if somebody's reporting an accident that didn't really happen. And then at the end of the process of mapping these companies, we're left with a major question. And according to this question, if there's a public interest to stop the fake news, for us as citizens, is it our interest to stop this? And we can't really see technological solutions. And our conclusion in brief indicates that there's a market failure here, because who would be willing to pay for us to stop the dissemination of fake news? So before the next session, I leave us with an open question. If technology doesn't solve the question, what are going to be the future options for a solution? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Lovely to be here. My name is Shwartz-Altshuler, and I deal with the borders between law, policy, ethics and regulation, and communication and technology. So, it was the year 2010, and the techno-optimism was at its peak. Everybody talked about the richness of knowledge and the wealth of information, and what could go wrong. Well, a lot apparently could go wrong. If we've not heard in the last 24 hours so many words about immunity, but nobody can really bring it all together into one coherent message. And if we're addicted to lies and conspiration, for example, that vaccination causes autism, I mean, even if national security experts left their bunkered rooms and now claim that the revolution is impacting our national resilience, well, something has gone wrong. Suddenly we all notice that the internet is full of fakery of content and of yardsticks, of likes and fans and bots, and even the word fake news. The term fake news has become itself fake news. Okay. Nice. Okay. It did take time, but this digital illusion, this digital walking through, into the path of the primroses has become obvious to us all. And now we have found ourselves in the midst of an age which is maybe digital, quasi-digital. It was made maybe by fake news, but also overload, not only of disinformation, but also disorientation. The Mishnah in the Avot tractate talks about learning processes, different kinds of learners, the different categories of learning, meaning the core of our Talmudic learning is our desire to act, first of all, independently, but also through mediators. And the mediators are science and communication and experts, so that we can be a community of learners, which is something that can create a sieve, a sifter between the dross and the gold, between the lies and the truth. And now, you know what's happened to us? Now, we've gone back to being sponges. We take on and absorb more and more information, and we're full of the plate. We're so deplete that we're indifferent. We can't take it anymore. So we just sit and huddle within our clans. And that's how an apocalypse looks. meaning the future looks grim and cold. Experts talk about an existential crisis, and when there's a crisis, you go to the mother figure. Who it's the mother figure in this case? The regulator. And maybe the entire story of the last decade is exactly that. Something that began with get your hands off the internet, let the internet run wild and free, to maybe, maybe what kind of regulation do you think is necessary for the internet? And then people like me that come from the field of policy start thinking and asking themselves, do we intervene? Should we intervene? How much? Why? What is the problem really? So if we go back to Dickens, in the big Dickens of, A Tale of Two Cities, we have to really admit to ourselves that we didn't ask ourselves on time how the democratic Eden of the age of knowledge and information was really supposed to look. We were ensnared with the glamour of a very lovely word, innovation, and we let the hands go. And the people who decided for us were corporations, oftentimes greedy mega corporations, and this is the outcome. But at the same time, if we can't explain where hell lies, then we will be trapped in that hell forever, because if we look for answers in the wrong places, we're not going to find them. And in my opinion, hell does not exist in the bad words of post-truth or fake news. That's not hell. Fake news isn't the real story, because digital without illusion, that's nostalgia. That's unbelievable. It's post-truth, fine. We can sign off on the new institutions that we can use in order to attract truth, and we can deal, of course, with our weaknesses. We can create truths, professional truths, which are truer. So what's the real problem? Well, I think the real problem lies in the paradise of the technological democracy, when being a liar is more profitable, more lucrative monetarily than speaking the truth. The story is not just the fact of the lie, but rather the feasibility of distributing the lie. Dr. Margalit told us, she's amazing, that she talked about fake news, but the problem is not only sharing, but rather how much money do you make from the attention, what's called engagement in the professional lingo. And because of this technological capitalism, this fake news isn't going anywhere as long as it is profitable, which ensures that, Orpaz's fake news, it's here to stay. But actually, because of that particular perspective of technological capitalism, I am not afraid of loss of truth, but rather loss of autonomy, of loss of control. That's what really scares me, because we are now at really the turning point between just before a revolution where information is just a raw material, between the revolution of information and the redundancy of information, and just like technological capitalism. And we can talk about that, can't we? Yes, technological capitalism has led to an infocalypse. The concern now is that it will lead to a datacalypse, meaning infiltration, invasion, domination of every aspect of our lives, a capitalism of surveillance, as was coined by Professor Shoshana Zuboff, meaning that's where hell lies. And that, I believe, is where we need to direct our involvement. Hell does not lie between truths, but in loss of control, our semi-conscious loss of control over seeking truth around us. We are reliant on Facebook's algorithm to tell us what's new, what's important, what's interesting. We rely on algorithm of Google to tell us what's true and not true, and how history looked, and what's the fastest way home. We rely on the algorithm of Netflix to tell us what's thrilling, and that of Amazon to tell us, what's new and what to read. So within that, we are giving data away. And as you know, if you have enough data about the body and the mind and your lifestyle, they can figure out the reality for us and understand me better than I understand myself. To analyze my personality traits, my politics, my sexual leanings, my emotionality, my hopes, my aspirations, my biggest despairs. Not only me, everybody. They can figure us out. Nobody had these skill sets in the past, even though there were lots of different regimes that wanted to. And in terms of regulatory involvement, fake news is in many senses a story that we must learn from, but it's a story of the past. I am concerned about the data collapse ahead because it will not only lead a difficulty to understand reality, but to digital dictatorships. And that's where we need to put the best of our attention, regulatorily speaking. Maybe we can check on, the secret rooms, but and bunkers that where, control rooms where decisions are made, but really it's our user rights that have to think about. Intelligence and discipline are at play. Education, knowledge seeking versus regulation and domination and control. We cannot continue to think about the problems as looking for truth, but rather understand that it's the regulation of information which is the real deal. So that was the good, that was the bad, and Bertolt Brecht of the 19th century references Dickens and the Industrial Revolution. What have we learned since Dickens? Well, the old problems don't distinguish between new problems and old problems, not if we're talking about information and surveillance of ourselves. It's not the technology that's responsible for the outcome. It's not the autonomous cars. It's not the tanks. It's not the bombers, but rather human factors which have created the situation. They don't begin at once, but something that is carried from the past to this very moment. And so it's so important to investigate them, also in terms of causality, of course, but also in terms of responsibility. And here, apparently, it's only in our hands if we're going to lead ourselves to paradise, to heaven, or we're going to lead ourselves to hell. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for very interesting lectures. And now, can we put on the mic? Yes, okay. We're a little bit late, and we're going to try to be very focused in this next debate. And I'm going to ask you to each answer two questions in relation to, of course, the attitude that you came with and connecting all of the points that have been raised here, because we heard conflicting views. So the first question is, what is the scenario that most scares you? We talk about a world of fake news and post-truth, and yet despite all of the things that have been said, what are the solutions that you believe are relevant, are feasible? So we'll start with you. Okay. The scenario that I think is scariest, it's not a future scenario, it's happening right now. It's a lack of interest, it's indifference. Nobody cares. We in psychology call it, we call it, a laxity, sort of, that you have this noise around you all the time, and at some point you get used to it. You no longer notice anything, and even if you know, one of the last research studies was done shows that even things that we hear that we know are lies, we don't care anymore. We have this global indifference. So what can you do with indifference on a global scale? Well, if people cared, we could do a lot. But with lack of caring, I don't know what we can do, particularly because decision makers and leaders have learned the golden rules of fake news, and they use them very, very well. And if nobody cares and they don't care, I don't know how you cut the Gordian knot here. I really don't. That's what I'm saying. That I'm not bringing good tidings, because working against apathy, I don't know how one does that. Okay, the scariest scenario and solutions. I could possibly say that the scariest scenario is the collapse of a bank, or the ability of a hospital to function, or hacking of elections. There's so many things that are scary in this world of fake news, and they all interrelate to the bigger risks of the cyber world. But I would actually like to point to something else, and that is that the world of fake news has become a major source of interest to security forces everywhere, and for me, that's very scary. Because security experts are dealing with the sensitivity of political discourse, but they're not doing it with enough sensitivity. So I would say that the thing that scares me today is where there is people are looking for fake news. There's not enough checks and balances to deal with it. Now, as for solutions, okay, I don't think that the fake news world is some horrible calamity from heaven. I don't think it's some fate. I think it's happening because of legal campaigns and systems, meaning specifically social media today can be the biggest platforms of communication in the world, but we, through our appointed officials, through our leadership here in the United States, have absolved them of all responsibility for the content they disseminate. That can be changed. We can tell the various social media platforms that they're the biggest companies in the world today. We can inform them that they have to have legal responsibilities, ethical responsibility for what they're disseminating. We can change the laws. And therefore, I believe that seeing this as something that's some horrible natural disaster, no, it can be dealt with. It would require bravery by decision makers, of course. Okay, so Liraz is saying, I'm not optimistic. Tehilla is saying, let's enforce responsibility on the corporations of who are disseminating fake news. So what about you? How do you see the worst scenario and possible solutions? Okay. What scares me most is the distance of decision-making factors from reality. Itai earlier talked about several truths, and she also defined the security truth. And unlike many other areas of life that have found through this new contract of the world a way to define their own truth, I believe that in the world of security, and specifically national security, there is an actual truth. I mean, are our enemies going to try to attack us, or not? Yes or no? It's a reality. It's actual empirical reality. It's a positivistic empirical reality, but it's certainly a reality that exists in national security. But my fear, like Liraz in that sense, that this is not some apocalypse for the next few decades. It's something that's happening now. We're experiencing and have experienced it. We are getting farther away from reality. And decision makers are getting farther away from actual reality and not confronting it. And operationally speaking, the repercussions of this are the possibility of a dynamic of escalation, which is built on miscalculations or misreading of reality, because you're having an unrealistic discussion among decision makers. This is not some far-fetched reality. This has a history. There was this kind of escalation dynamic after the First World War, after the Second World War. This is something that historically has some precedent, but it's certainly very typical of these days. It's already occurring. It happened in 2006. It happened in 2014. So can we avoid it? I'll give you an answer which is a double answer, let's say. On the one hand, I don't think that at the moment we have a concept, a theory that can deal with this problem. Our current theory is, as I tried to present earlier, is a platform upon which the problem infiltrates our reality. But we're a liberal democracy, so we can't handle it. How do we want all of these, pluralistically, all of the opinions be heard? And for many years we believe that this debate will manage to help us make decisions and informed decisions. No, that didn't really work, and it's not bearing fruit. On the other hand, I think reality has shown, even in today's world, that we can avoid escalation. Israel and the Hamas are managing, after the escalation of 2014, with a lot of noise around, are managing to stop the escalation. And even the US and Iran, at least until now, have managed. And I think that after the assassination of Soleimani, it was very interesting to see what unfolded. The Iranians ceded. Their people, they said that there were dozens of dead. Trump tweeted all as well. Over time, of course, we discovered that there were several, there were a large number of casualties. Without getting into a dynamic of escalation, these two countries managed to use the post-truth kind of narrative in order to synchronize their actions. This is one way in which this has impacted actual reality. Okay, I want to thank you all. And a moment point before I release you to lunch. Just a few announcements. As we said, we opened a fake or real game that allows you to participate, even people who are not here in the hall, and you're well invited to go to fakenews.inss. You can see the full address here, and you can enter, you can see and answer the questions. This afternoon we have the program with the from people from the Lipkin Shachak Institute. We're now going to break for lunch at 1:30. We will come back for a technology session. It will be a fascinating session, so we'll meet you after lunch. I want to thank, of course, Itai, Brun, Dr. Liraz, Margalit, and Dr. Altshuler. Thank you so much to our panelists.